All right. Chapter 18 continued. The History of Life, Part B. And just a quick update. Roger the dog who was whining, maybe you heard that, he wasn't stuck on the stairs. He was just tired of being outside. So he's perfectly fine. I know some of you were probably worried about him from last video, but perfectly fine. Okay, Chapter 18, History of Life, Part B. So we covered the Paleozoic and the Mesozoic eras last time. Now we're going to cover the Cenozoic era. All right, the Cenozoic era was the age of what? Who remembers? Raise your hand. Yeah, you, Jim Bob. That's right, the age of mammals. The Cenozoic is the age of mammals. So basically, big picture, if you remember, the Mesozoic ended with the asteroid impact that wiped out the dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs are gone. And as the Earth recovers and returns to normal, as climates, settle down after the asteroid impact, there's room to be, or there's ground to be covered. That's a weird phrase. There's space in the ecosystems for new species. And so mammals survive the asteroid impact and they start to take the place of the dinosaurs. So the point is, during the Cenozoic, mammals diversify into all sorts of different species, weird species at first, as you'll see, and then eventually becoming more and more modern-like. And the Earth has been dominated by mammals ever since the dinosaurs went extinct into the Mesozoic. Okay, so the Cenozoic. So let's begin. This begins around 66 to 63 million years ago, give or take. And I mentioned that the dinosaurs are gone, so mammals take over. All right, the mammals have been around since the late Triassic, early Jurassic, but they were egg-laying and they were probably nocturnal and they were kind of small and insignificant in the sense that there weren't many of them. There's just not a lot of fossils of mammals during the Mesozoic. But during the Cenozoic, we start seeing more and more and more new mammal species showing up for the first time. As far as plants, we see that the flowering plants, the angiosperms, which showed up in the Mesozoic, if you remember, they really take off and start dominating in the Cenozoic. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the mammals because a lot of the mammals are just eating flowering plants or eating fruit, as you'll see later when we talk about primates. So mammals and flowering plants become the dominant organisms. Okay, in the Cenozoic, let me go back, sorry, we get lots of weird critters. Remember this guy, Glyptodonts, these big armored armadillo ancestors that Darwin saw fossils of in South America. So they're around. This is Andrewsarchus. This is like a giant, looks like a wolf, but it's not a wolf, but basically giant mammalian carnivore. Start getting weird critters like those. Eventually in the Cenozoic, I'm fast forwarding a few million years, we get larger mammals, and then we get the ice ages that occur in the last few 20,000 years to a few 100,000 years ago. We get these ice ages that kind of come and go. And so some of the mammals that we see, especially at high latitudes, like the mammals that we see in North America, for example, become large and hairy, well, furry. So we get these giant ground sloths, we get saber-toothed cats, we get woolly mammoths and mastodons, and we get woolly rhinos. All right, but leading up to that, how did the mammals evolve? Well, early on, it's thought that the first mammals, again, they were nocturnal and small, and maybe they were insectivores, meaning they ate insects. And so they kind of had this basic skull. And over time, this skull got modified in lots of different directions. So it became modified into the carnivorous skull that we see in raccoons and coyotes and mountain lions and cats. And it became modified into eventually grass specialized skulls, so horses and deer and cows that specialize in eating grass. It became specialized into fruit eating skulls and teeth, like with fruit eating bats. Eventually, it became specialized into eating and catching fish, like we see in dolphins, in straining seawater, like we see with the baleen whales. We see huge teeth, like at the the teeth that we find in walruses that help them. Basically, they've got these crushing teeth in the back for crushing mollusks, and then these big teeth in the front that they use to fight others. And then you get these you get modification of the skull for becoming more and more specialized in insects. So this is an anteater skull, and anteaters are good at catching ants with their tongue. So as mammals diversify, they specialize in different foods, whether that's eating other animals, or eating grass, or eating fruit, or eating fish, or eating mollusks. So as the mammals specialize, we see that show up in their anatomy and their physiology. All right, and so as this happened, let's talk about some of the modifications that mammals made over time. And to do that, let's talk about what defines a mammal. Well, a mammal has milk glands, hair, and is warm-blooded. So each of those should be self-explanatory. Milk glands means they produce milk. So every mammal produces milk. Humans, we make milk. Females, moms make milk. Cows obviously make some delicious milk. Rats make milk. Dolphins make milk. Walruses make milk. Cats make milk. Every mammal makes milk. Why do they make milk? Because their babies drink milk. All right, so some mammals lay eggs, but those mammals that give live birth, like humans and dogs and cats and cows, the young initially feed on milk as they transition to, or as they supplement their diet with other foods. Mammals also have hair or fur, right? And so humans don't have as much fur as other animals. We have hair on our heads, and some people have hair on their faces, guys and girls. And then we've got hair in other places, but other mammals remained furrier and have more hair. Other mammals had hair but lost it. So dolphins don't have hair, but they used to. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then mammals are warm-blooded. So in other words, they maintain a constant body temperature. So the amphibians and reptiles and dinosaurs, they were cold-blooded, meaning their temperature is more or less the same temperature as their external environment. But mammals can maintain a constant internal temperature, and they pay a price. They got to eat a lot of food, but the nice thing is they can walk around when it's cold. So they can walk around at night, or they can swim in cold water, or they can come out they can be active in the winter if they want. Mammals also have different types of teeth. So going back to reptiles and dinosaurs, all of their teeth kind of look the same. If you think about a crocodile's mouth, all of the teeth are these conical teeth that kind of look the same. But mammals are able to specialize their teeth so they can eat different types of foods. So the basic pattern on mammals is molars in the back, used for crushing. Premolars, which can be used for slicing and dicing or whatever. Canines, which are used for stabbing. And incisors, which are used for snipping or clipping. And so mammals will modify these teeth in different ways. So if you're going to be a carnivore, you're going to have big canines. And if you're eating grass, then you're not going to have big canines, but you're going to have big incisors for snipping the grass. And then you're going to have flat-ridged but sharp molars for slicing up that grass. So the earliest mammal fossils just have basic teeth. Their teeth are more reptile-like. The earliest mammals also laid eggs, and they were small. They also had milk glands, but the milk just kind of leaked out, kind of like if you were sweating milk, and the babies would just like drink up these streams of milk that were probably running through the mom's fur. Pretty gross. All of those things change over time. All right, so let's look at some examples of mammal evolution. So horses, tapirs, rhinos, and then these extinct titanotheres and chelicotheres. These are all descendants of an early critter. So this would be the ancestor of all these species that diversified in these different ways. Let's focus on horses. So horses over time gained size and they modified their teeth. So as you'll see in the next couple of slides, the earliest horses were small, so like dog size. And their teeth were better for like eating leaves and browsing. And then over time, horses got bigger and became faster, and they were able to process grass. So this happened over a period of like 50 million years. We also see a pattern where the earliest horse fossils, they're walking on paws, basically. So it looked like this. This drawing's not that great, but this is a paw. And then it would be the equivalent of you walking on your open-faced hand. And then over time, they started walking on their toes. So this would be like you're walking on your fingers. And they were walking on maybe 4 or 5 fingers initially, and then they started walking on 3. And then those 3 fingers kind of fused together to make a hoof. And then these 2 side fingers moved up, and a modern horse, its hoof consists of just its middle finger. So walk around on your middle finger, that's what a horse is doing. Here are some different graphics I stole from the web showing the evolution of horses. Which one you want to look at? Let's look at this one. So the earliest horses I mentioned are small. You can see here they've got 4 toes that they're walking around on, and over time the toe configuration changes so that modern horses are walking on their middle toe. The earliest ones first appear in North America, right? So horses first evolved in North America, and then they probably moved to Eurasia through Alaska, probably, and you can find them, and they also moved down to South America initially, or eventually. Then the horses that were in South America and North America went extinct, and the ones in Eurasia survived. And then when Europeans came to North America, they brought horses with them. So the wild ponies of the American West, they are living in the same, area that their ancestors lived, but they're living there by way of North America to Europe and Asia, and then back to North America on boats. All right, yeah, and then whoa, and then it doesn't really show it, but I mentioned earlier that these early horses probably ate leaves, and then as grasses became more dominant, and we get these big grasslands in North America, that's why the horses get bigger and faster, because as they start moving out in the open plain, it's better to be fast so you can see your predators and run away from them really quickly. Whereas if you're living in the forest, it's better to be small and kind of hide and, dart around to avoid getting eaten. Camels evolved. They began in North America as well. And similar to the horses, the initial camels were small, and they walked on toes. Camels today, instead of walking on 1 toe like horses, they walk on 2 toes. But over time, the camels initially became kind of like llamas and alpacas, and then eventually they got humps that would allow them to survive harsh conditions. So camels began in North America, and then they also moved to Asia. Elephants. The earliest elephants are fairly small, and they don't look as elephant-like. And then over time, they diversified in all these different forms. So here's some early elephants. So they lack tusks and trunks, and then over time they get trunks, and you get weird elephants that have like long jaws for scooping, that have huge tusks, that have short trunks, and then eventually you get your mammoths, and then the only surviving elephants out of this whole lineage are modern elephants, the African elephant and the Asian or Indian elephant. Whales. So whales are mammals. So where do whales and dolphins come from? So the first whales show up around 52 million years ago. So this is about 10 million years after the dinosaurs go extinct. And the first whales, as you'll see in the next slide, are terrestrial. So they walk around on land. So initially they look a lot like hippos. And this is confirmed actually by molecular analysis. So by looking at DNA, whales and their ancestors and looking at their bone structures, they've got a lot in common with hippos. So hippos are kind of a cousin of whales and dolphins. But over time, whales began on land, and then they became semi-aquatic, so they would move into the water, and then eventually they became fully aquatic. So for that to happen, their legs turned to flippers. So if you remember, this is interesting because when fish moved onto land, their flippers turned to legs, and it turned into legs. And then when whales moved back into the water, their legs had to turn back into flippers. For whales swimming around in the water, they need to be streamlined. And so basically their front limbs turned into flippers, and over time they lost their hind limbs, and their tails became, whale-like tails or dolphin-like tails with a big section at the end for moving water. They became streamlined, so they lost their fur, all right, and then their nostrils move to the top of their head. So here's Artiocetus, which is an early whale, and you can see its nostril is here. So on the front of its snout, kind of like any land mammal. And then this is, I can't say it, Proseuglodon, 36 million years old. So its nostril has moved kind of to the middle of its snout. And then here's a Amazonian dolphin, which is extinct, but it resembles modern dolphins, and its nostrils at the top of its head. So you know the blowhole on a dolphin or a whale, you know the thing that Kramer hit a golf ball. No, did George Costanza hit a golf ball and got stuck in the blowhole of a whale? I don't know. Any Seinfeld fans out there? The blowhole of a dolphin or a whale, that's their nostrils. So their nostrils are on top of their head, and they can open and close their blowhole, and basically what they're doing is they're opening or closing their nostrils. So dolphins and whales have lungs, which is a land animal characteristic, and so they've moved into the water, and they don't have gills, right? They still have those lungs, and so whales and dolphins have to take gulps of air and then hold their breath as they swim around under the water. I mentioned that they lost their hind legs, but they still have the remnants of their hind legs and their pelvis. So this is a right whale. So you can see that they've got these bones back here that are kind of just hanging out. They're not attached to the body skeleton. And this is basically the remnants of their hind legs. What's really weird, oh, shoot. Yeah. And then these are some of the fossil whales. So Pakicetus is considered one of the first or the earliest whales. So this thing was terrestrial, but probably went into the water to catch fish. Its nostrils were at the end of its snout, like we saw before. It still probably had fur, and it had 4 limbs. So it still had legs. All right. And then this one is Ambulocetus. So still had nostrils in the front, towards the front, and it had 4 limbs, maybe with webbing between the toes to help it swim. It's a little bit more streamlined. It has these guys, by the way. Why are they whales? Well, it's because of their ears. So their ears have a lot in common with whales. Do you remember when I was talking about how as fish transition from water to land, hearing sounds is a lot different in the air than in the water? So that the ear had to adapt to hearing sounds in the air, and so their ears changed. Well, in whales, it's the same thing. They just had to go backwards. So their ears are adapted to hearing sounds through air on land, but as they moved into the water, their ears adapted so they could hear sounds in the water. And by the way, just to illustrate that point, you can hear really well right now through air because your ears are designed to hear sounds in air. But if you go to the pool and you dive underwater, and your friend does too, and you guys try to have a conversation, it sounds terrible. It's like wah, wah, wah. And that's because the sound is behaving differently, and it's interacting with your ear in a way that's muffling and distorting the sounds. So that's why you can't hear well underwater. All right, but whales can hear well underwater, and that's because their ears have a different design than us. Okay, moving on. This is Rhodocetus, so you can see that it has a small tail. It's got nostrils that are starting to move back, right? So halfway up the snout, and it probably had flippers, or it had legs that are starting to turn into flippers. Basilosaurus, so about 7 million years later, this thing just has front limbs, and they're flippers. It has a blowhole, so its nostrils on the top of its skull, and its tail has a fluke, this flat part for pushing water. So this is looking much more like a modern whale. And then Dorniodon, about 38 million years ago, it has tiny hind limbs, which are flippers, but they're starting to disappear. It's got flippers in the front. It's got a blowhole. It's got a fluke. All right, if you line them all up, they're showing up here in the starting around 50 million years, going up to about 35 million years. We get these, or 24 million years, we get all these different species of whales showing up. Okay, so over time, again, they became more and more aquatic. Their blowholes, their nostrils became blowholes moving back in their skull. Their limbs became flippers, and they became more streamlined and lost their fur. All right, and we don't find any aquatic mammals up until this time. So, in other words, there's no whale fossils during the Paleozoic or the Mesozoic. They're all in the Cenozoic. Well, that was quick. That is a brief foray, run through of the evolution of mammals during the Cenozoic. But we've left off a really important part. We haven't really talked about primates and humans. And so that will be the topic of the next video. Like and subscribe. Whatever.